Hi, my name's Chris, and this is a video response to Lindybeige. You've mentioned that filmmakers and TV show producers very often get roads in medieval and Dark Age and ancient films wrong. In two of your videos, you've stated quite plainly that grass should not grow in the middle of a road, and that you should not see visible wheel ruts the way you would on a modern dirt road where you have cars going down. In your video, you say that up until the Victorian age, a single horse-drawn cart, as in a cart drawn by a single horse in the middle, was the most common form of transportation along roads. And therefore, the middle of the road should be the most trampled because that's where the horse is. However, you're completely overlooking the fact that the cart itself has wheels, and those wheels have to be on the ground. One horse walking down the middle of a road will trample an area about 13 centimeters across, roughly circular, every place where it puts its foot down. All the other grass down the middle of the road will be spared from trampling. However, a cart with wheels, likely made of wood, possibly clad with iron, those wheels are going to be in contact with every single piece of grass, the entire length of the journey of the cart, trampling all the grass that those wheels come in contact with. And this train of thought got me to the point where I decided, well, I'm not an archaeologist, I'm not an equestrian expert of any sort, but I am a computer scientist, and if there's one thing I can do, it's write a program that will simulate this. And that is exactly what I did. I wrote a program. The source code for it is available online. I've posted a link below. And how the program works is it approximates what area would be trampled by horses, humans, horse-drawn carts, and sheep, just for diversity, and explores what happens when so many of those creatures, those entities per day, go along a grassy path, assuming seasonally variable grass growth rates. So in the summer, you're going to get grass regrowing much, much faster. In the winter, you're going to have much slower or no grass growth. And let's just see what happens. What we have here is a still image of what the footprints for all the entities in my program look like. We have a human. For simplicity, I approximate a human footprint to be a rectangle. We also have horses and sheep with circular feet. The horse hooves are obviously larger and more spaced out. Sheep feet, sheep hooves are much smaller, more closely spaced. And we have the cart, which features wheel ruts down each side and the horse footprints down the middle. And now what we see is an animation of what happens when multiples of each of these entities go down a grassy field. We can see that a large group of humans going down the road will tend to produce a wide path. This is potentially a little over wide, but it seems reasonable, especially in the winter when the middle will be very sodden and muddy. So people will tend to walk on the edges where the grass is trampled, but there's still enough grass to keep the mud together. We can see that the horses will trample an area of ground similar to the humans. It's a little bit more compact. For my simulation, I determined somewhat arbitrarily that the majority of horse traffic would be single horses, possibly in pairs. So they tend towards the middle of the road much more than humans do. Humans, I imagine, would be walking in groups somewhat more often. But again, we see that the horses trample a region concentrated in the middle of the road, tapering off towards the edges. That the Romans, when constructing their roads, would herd sheep or goats down to trample the dirt down before they would lay cobblestones to build their stone roads. This to me seems entirely reasonable, especially since modern construction equipment includes something called a goat's foot roller, which looks like a giant machine-pushed rolling pin with spikes coming out of it. The spikes are flat on the end, but this is to simulate sharp goat hooves that dig into the ground and trample very, very efficiently by exerting large amounts of pressure on the ground. And then finally we see a simulation of horse-drawn carts. And for this simulation, I've reduced the number fairly dramatically. This is a simulation of 10 carts a day going back and forth. We can see the horses, they do still trample the middle of the road somewhat, but The wheels trample very clean, straight lines where they travel, which is exactly what one would expect. If this is what a car does when its wheels go down a road, then there's no reason not to assume that this is what an ancient cart would do. If we combine all of this traffic together into one larger animation, which is now playing, then we can see that we get fairly evenly trampled down the middle, but we still do see clean wheel ruts down each side. And if you look at the numbers at the top of the simulation, this is with only 4 carts per day, and several people, several horses, lots of sheep. But even with carts making up less than 5% of the total traffic, we still see distinct wheel ruts. This simulation, while not the be-all and end-all of the debate, I'm sure, does indicate that we should have some trampling in the middle, but we should have more trampling in wheel ruts, especially if we take the assertion that the majority of traffic should be horse-drawn carts. At that point, as this simulation that's now on screen shows, we should have lots and lots of trampling in the wheel ruts and relatively little in the middle. Some, obviously, because that's where the horse or horses, in the case of a 2 or 4 horse-drawn carriage, goes. But we still get most of the trampling happening under the wheels. We can see in the simulation that it doesn't take very many carts to get noticeable wheel ruts. We should have more trampled grass in the middle than what we see in The Last Kingdom, but I would argue that the scene in Gladiator actually does a fairly accurate job. We have distinct wheel ruts in the ground, but we also have trampled grass in the middle. The middle of the road, as the simulation indicates, especially in summer and fall when you have the highest growth, should have some grass in the middle. The idea that the road should be perfectly flat, beaten down in the middle, despite the assertion that the majority of the traffic is horse-drawn carts, is erroneous, in my opinion. So I hope this was interesting. Lloyd, Mr. Beige, however I should be addressing you, love your videos. You're one of my favorite YouTubers, but I think you got this one wrong. But I do agree with you that that leaf was terribly out of place.